Hey folks, welcome back to the Psychedelic Podcast. This is your host, Paul F. Austin, and today we're exploring a question that could transform professional sports. What if the solution to traumatic brain injury has been hiding in plain sight in the form of psilocybin mushrooms? We're joined by Daniel Carcillo, a former NHL player and two-time Stanley Cup champion with the Chicago Blackhawks. After suffering 7 concussions during his professional hockey career, Daniel discovered the healing potential of psilocybin mushrooms and has since become a leading advocate for psychedelic therapy in treating traumatic brain injury. Daniel's story takes us from his days as an NHL enforcer known as Car Bomb to his current work running legal psilocybin retreats in Oregon, where he's helping others with similar conditions find healing through natural medicine. Known for his aggressive playing style during his NHL career, Daniel has transformed his experience into this pioneering work in medicine. After spending years seeking conventional treatment for post-concussion syndrome, he discovered mushrooms, and today he's helping people do the same. Daniel and I have known each other for maybe 4 or 5 years now. We've done a couple, I think we did an Instagram Live at one point. We stay in touch, and then we just happened both to be at the Eudaimonia Summit in West Palm Beach, which is where we recorded this podcast episode. And we got to sit down in person and record this in front of a live audience, which was a ton of fun. And so in our conversation together, Daniel and I discuss his journey from NHL enforcer to psychedelic advocate, the culture of violence in professional hockey and its impact, Daniel's personal experiences with psilocybin, the scientific basis for why psilocybin is so effective in treating TBI, Daniel's current work running legal psilocybin retreats in Oregon, and the future of psychedelic therapy in professional sports. All right, that's it for now. Let's get into my conversation with Daniel Carcillo. I'm sitting across from Daniel Carcillo with a bit of an audience here to listen to this podcast. Daniel is a former professional ice hockey player who won 2 Stanley Cups in 2013 and 2015. His on-ice reputation as an enforcer led him to being called the Car Bomb, which is interesting and we'll get into. And after you retired from the NHL in 2015, you decided to start to assist former NHL players suffering from post-concussion syndrome and mental health issues. And I think that's expanded to broadly athletes and other folks as well. And you are the founder and CEO of Wasana Health, which we'll talk a little bit about, and now doing a lot of psilocybin retreats and experiences in Oregon and soon Colorado. And specifically what we'll talk in depth and detail about is the relationship between psilocybin and healing from concussions and TBIs. But where I want to start, Daniel, is what's it like to win a Stanley Cup? Talk us through that experience, that feeling, that build up as an athlete. What is it like in that moment to be at the top of the world?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me here.
Totally.
It's about as hard to explain as a psychedelic experience.
Taking mushrooms.
Yeah. All that I can really say is that you work so hard for your entire life, sometimes unconsciously as a kid, working up towards getting into the NHL, and when you get there, it's just really unique to be on a team where everybody is so singularly focused on one thing and one mission, and everyone is so different, but we all play our role and we're all the same, and we're sort of pulling on the same rope, so to speak. So it's really cool to be in that environment and be in that room. We all suffer together, and then hopefully you're the team that's standing atop the mountain. I lost the Stanley Cup in 2010 when I was on the Philadelphia Flyers to the Blackhawks. That's how I kind of opened the door to possibly getting on the Blackhawks. And then we ended up winning twice in 13 and my last year in 15. 13, I didn't have my son or my now wife. So that was a little bit of a different experience. And, going on stage with Rush and Mumford and Sons and a big music guy. But at the end of the day, looking across in a room where you have, again, that focus where nothing else in life matters, right? You're just keeping yourself as healthy and fit to attain that goal. And when you do, and you can say that you're the best in the world, it's something else.
Yeah, I mean it's incredible. I grew up in Grand Rapids, Michigan, so our team were the Red Wings. And when I was growing up, I was born in '90. You know, it's Lidstrom and Fedorov and Yzerman.
That was the dynasty.
That was the dynasty.
Yeah, that was the dynasty. And you had a great AHL team there, right? Grand Rapids Griffins.
The Grand Rapids Griffins.
Yeah,
exactly. Absolutely. So I grew up. I played soccer and baseball myself, but a lot of friends played hockey. I would go to hockey in high school. Why is it that hockey is such a violent game, and how did that? I mean, especially because you were called the car bomb, you were an enforcer for a Stanley Cup champion. How did that impact your health and well-being, and how did you even step into that role in the first place?
So I was born in Canada, and you're pretty much born with skates on. Right. Everything revolved around the rink. It was a very small community of about 6,500 people in King City, Ontario.
Okay.
And, of 30 million people, there's like 2 million kids a year that play this sport, and it is the national sport. And the way that it was taught when you go to the rink back in the day, like we were hitting at 4 or 5 years old. They don't do that anymore, but you are taught to...
And by hitting, you mean getting in fist fights?
Not necessarily fist fights at 4, 5, and 6, but you are definitely taught to play the game in a manner where you test somebody's will to touch that puck.
Okay.
Through physical force, through intimidation, through slashing them, you have to make them go through the wall. And you learn really quickly at 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, if you have what it takes to continue to take that kind of punishment and to be enthralled in that kind of competition. And some kids don't, and some kids thrive in it. And I thrived in it. I always loved the fact that I could leave the rest of the world behind, no matter what was happening in my friendships in school, and come to the rink and everything else faded away. And I was able to play this game with a different set of rules. And I thrived on the competition, on seeing another man or boy across from me quit. Because I was willing to go further than he was. And then you sort of start learning that kind of spatial awareness in life away from the game too. And that was just something that was innately built in me from hardworking Italian parents that, everything that you do to the best of your ability. That grew into when I was 15, I moved away from home. So you're very young when you make this decision to try to take the step to the NHL. And that's when you start deciding just how far you can take it, because you guys can drop the gloves and you can bare knuckle box on ice, and the level of intensity goes up. But if you're honorable and you play the game a certain way, there's an unspoken contract that happens. Unfortunately or fortunately, there's hazing that happens. It's very cult-like in hockey, similar to stories of the military, etc. And there's things that happened to me in my rookie year that turned me into this person on the ice that was car bomb. The old saying that hurt people. Well, I had a lot of anger and frustration, and I ended up taking that out through a game where it was legal on other people, and that led to addictions, that led to living very hard on and off the ice, which I got control of when I was 25, which then led to meditation and visualization and this whole other world that opened up to me. Yeah, it's been a very interesting journey.
Yeah, what was the inflection point there for you to be able to, at the age of 25, open up into meditation and these other practices?
So all of my injuries in the NHL happened between a 5-year period, like 19 to 25.
And how old were you when you got into the NHL?
I was 18.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So again, moved away from home at 15, drafted to the NHL at 17, turning 18, into the AHL at 19, turning 20, and then 20 to 25, my first 5 years. And you live pretty fast, and you're a kid, and you got to grow up pretty quick. But all of my injuries happened in that 5-year span. I had 5 concussions. I had 3 broken noses, left torn labrum. I fought, I think, around 120 times. So just a lot of things started to go wrong. And this was at the time where muscle relaxers, opiates, everything was freely given on a plane without a prescription. And so we were injected with a lot of synthetic heroin and all of these things to manage pain. So what happened was at 25, I had 2 surgeries back to back, and I got prescribed these 30 milligram hydrocodone 90 pills. And within 3 months, I was addicted based off of what happened to me with the trauma of the hazing and how much pain I was in emotionally and physically. And I had to ask for help, and thankfully there was a program where I could take advantage of it. It's a substance abuse program. And I ended up going to Malibu in the canyon, and I started to learn about Indian sweat lodges and breath work and visualization and talking about the things that you may not like happen to you in the past to move on from them so they don't govern the rest of your life. And I read this book that completely changed my life, which was called The Joy of Living by Youngi Mingor Rinpoche. And it just talked about how to be aware all the time when you're on a walk, when you're in practice, when you're waking up, being aware of how your body is feeling, being aware how you feel around certain people in certain situations. And I just decided to go clean and sober for 2 years. Yeah, my life changed. Those last 5 years, I went to the Stanley Cup Finals 4 times with 3 different teams, and all this good stuff started to happen. And I was just kind of, you can't go back, right? You can't unlearn those things. Unfortunately, they don't really help you when you're car bomb and you've got to, take souls and you've got to do things on the ice that you're very
There's
conscious
a persona
of now.
that you now represent, right? An identity that you've become attached to even.
It's just a dangerous thing when you're playing in a sport that moves that fast to think. You have to react, right? Without emotion. And as you know, these practices make you way too connected to everything, right? You're more connected to the pain. You're also more connected to the good. But it just became hard to do my job, and eventually, luckily, I got my 6th and 7th concussion, and the symptoms were so bad that I couldn't. So I had to walk away at the age of 30 in 2015, which then started a whole new fight, right, with the healthcare system and with trying to get a handle on all my symptoms.
So where does psilocybin then enter the picture for you?
In 2019. Yeah, so for 4 years, from 15 to 19, I went to doctors. I spent $500,000 of my own money going to these kind of cash pay stroke rehabilitation concussion centers. For 2 years, from 15 to 17, I did a lot of pharmaceuticals that were prescribed to me by doctors to manage symptoms like slurred speech, headache, head pressure, insomnia, impulse control issues, light sensitivity, noise sensitivity, appetite, weight loss, memory loss, on top of the anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation. So it was a tough road. Got off of those, had a couple seizures, and then for 2 more years, I started to do the stroke rehabilitation and just really read PubMed papers. And it was 2017 that I read Robin Harris's study done in 2014 of a brain, placebo brain. Yeah. And I was going to all these places with all these doctors, and they're like, well, your brain is shut down due to trauma.
Right.
We're going to wake it back up by giving you all these tests, identifying which part of the brain. There's 6 different parts. Concussion isn't on the whole brain. Mine was my lower right cortex. And then they were going to give me these exercises that were going to wake this up. And I thought, wow, amazing. While I was there paying $1,500 a day, it worked. When I went home, it did not work. And then I saw this study. I'm like, wow, this is, we used to do mushrooms at keggers all the time. And then you kind of feel good, but you never really, connect the dots. And I thought that this could work for me. 2019, I was hopeless. I had 3 kids. I was going to bed at 4 a.m., waking up at 4 p.m. to try to miss as much of the day as possible. I had a mild dementia diagnosis at that time. I had a CTE diagnosis, early onset, which is another neurodegenerative disease that a lot of football players, unfortunately kill themselves and would shoot themselves in the chest so their brain can be analyzed. And I just thought hey, like get on a plane. Denver just decriminalized it. I couldn't get arrested for it. And luckily a teammate reached out just at the right time, and I took an invitation. And then my life changed. I took diagnostics before I left. Anytime I tried new treatments or treatment regimen, I wanted to, especially with the stigma surrounding this. And I took a QEEG, measures the electrical waves of the brain. I took a blood panel, and then I took 5.6 grams and
Of mushrooms, dried psilocybin.
It was the hardest journey that I'd ever had to go through. It wasn't a bad trip. It was a difficult trip. Mushrooms seem to exasperate what's at the forefront of my mind. And anecdotally, it does that for other people. I was suicidal. I was also very angry at the NHL and at the situation that I was in, but I was, looking back on it now, very much stuck in a kind of a victimhood mindset of blaming what had happened instead of trying my best to move on from it. And the mushroom showed me that, and showed me that you can just stop thinking this way and we can help you. We can heal your brain, and then you can set up programs, good things, because that NHL will always be there. The sickness will always be there. And it was that simple. And then I surrendered to it in 2.5 hours. I was just so tired. So 6 months later, I retested my brain and my blood. I did 2 high doses 3 months apart. I did a washout period of 3 weeks, and then I went on low dose, 5 days on, 2 days off.
Which is the Paul Stamets protocol for microdosing.
0.1, they were very good mushrooms, like strong mushrooms. And retested my brain and my blood. Doctors couldn't find any abnormalities in my brain after 6 months.
Wow.
And they couldn't, my blood work was completely equalized. We were talking a little bit before, but my free testosterone was equalized. I had the free testosterone of a 72-year-old male. Cortisol levels were down to normal levels. So it does something to the pituitary gland for sure, which gets injured when you're a concussion survivor. It sits in a very rigid part of our skull. So I learned all these things about the brain. And then luckily these mushrooms I use them, they use me, and 6 years now where I happy, healthy, highest operating version of myself, and just blessed to still be healthy enough to hopefully carry this message to other concussion survivors and neurodegenerative disease survivors and people that are suffering, that you can get better.
So psilocybin for traumatic brain injury, for concussions, right? You've had this anecdotal experience. There's been, I would say, some research, but not as much as probably folks like yourself would like to see. But there was a recent study published out of Stanford by Nolan Williams that showed that Navy SEALs who were given ibogaine, which is an alkaloid from iboga, a root bark in Gabon, I think it was like 95% of them ended up having no symptoms for TBI after this one single ibogaine experience. Now, you and I both know, and I'll make this very clear in the podcast, the ibogaine does have certain risks, specifically around cardiac arrest. And so psilocybin is, I think, safer than ibogaine. And the point that I'm getting to is there's more and more clinical research. There's more folks like yourself and Kerry Rhodes and Aaron Rodgers, and even Mark Messier mentioned his own psilocybin use when he was, young and growing up. There are a lot of professional athletes who are starting to come out and talk about this, but really only one professional athlete organization, the UFC, that has sort of professed an interest in exploring this more. Why isn't it that the NHL and the NFL in particular are actively supporting psychedelic research at this point in time with how efficacious it shows to be for concussions and TBIs?
These professional sports leagues are some of the biggest corporations on earth, and they care a lot about liability. And unfortunately, we live in a world and we're beholden to a system that needs to prove that it works for a specific indication. It's not enough that the FDA has deemed psilocybin breakthrough therapy designation for 2 different companies with intractable treatment-resistant depression for Compass and MDD for USONA. It seems as though that in order for these leagues to bring it on, somebody has to do a study specific to concussion and prove it out. Unfortunately, I started a drug development company. So I patented the method of use that I used, and we went through the FDA. We got to a pre-IND meeting, and strategically, we said that we wanted to look at concussion, that low doses, it was going to be a low dose regimen in combination with CBD. It seems to work. And it seems to work for an indication associated with concussion. You can't actually go for concussion.
Because it's sort of like a momentary thing, whereas maybe the symptoms that result from it are more long lasting.
They have no idea what it is,
Gotcha.
right? Like it is a list of symptoms subjectively answered to a doctor that says, yes, you have concussion, but then there's also a list of symptoms that are associated with it. Okay. And so the only program that you can actually prove to get a medicine for are the channels or indications that are associated with it. There's no such thing as a program that you can actually research concussion because they can't justify it through animal studies, right? So does that make sense?
Totally.
So I had to go for concussion-related depression. And we went in as a strategy and said, this works for concussion-related depression. This is our indication. What do you think about it, FDA? And we were hoping they would do this. The FDA said, if you think it works for concussion-related depression, then it works for depression, because we can't tell you the difference between concussion-related depression and regular old depression. Okay. So you have to go after depression. So it increased our TAM, and all the investors were really happy. And you know, we ended up selling that program to a NASDAQ-listed company. Simply because it just became so prohibitive to raise funds. And there's a whole game if you don't have composition of matter, which is a patent on the actual molecule. People just aren't that interested in investing in methods of use because other people can enter the space, right? If you don't have that type of intellectual property.
Right.
So after we sold that, I just really focused on getting back to what actually got me better, which was natural medicine. And I'm of the belief that, yes, we need these rigorous studies through the FDA, of course, to validate. But the reality is the FDA is using synthetic medicine. Right. All of these programs that are regulated frameworks in Oregon, Colorado, and hopefully in Massachusetts, these are natural mushrooms. Right. These are full spectrum mushrooms that come with different alkaloids and tryptamines, as you know, that are benefiting people. So my goal is to just track data the same way that I learned to track data through the FDA with a full spectrum mushroom, and then prove that we can amass data, we can heal people in a bunch of different indications. And then once I have that in the next 6 months, I'll go back to the NHLPA. And this is coming back full circle to your question. And I'll say, hey, this works for concussion. I've actually got a bunch of guys that are coming to the retreats. Do you want to do something, right? They actually just announced a committee for CTE. We know that it's bad.
I know what CTE is, but what is CTE, just for our audience?
So chronic traumatic encephalopathy, dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS. These are diseases that have tau protein entanglements in the brain, which eventually take over hemispheres of the brain, strangle them, cut them off from language, mobility, etc., and render you a child, again, useless. My grandmother died of Alzheimer's. It runs in my family. So it's a very serious thing that I have to be aware of. If you have 3 or more concussions, you are 80% more likely to get one of these diseases. And chronic traumatic encephalopathy is something that is associated with repetitive head trauma as well as concussion, which are 2 different things. You don't actually need a concussion to get it. You just have to need to be repetitively hit in the head or body to cause that type of trauma. And it's dangerous. It happens fast, and it can only be diagnosed when you're dead, right. Unfortunately. Anecdotally, what happened with me, I know that I have CTE in my brain. Yeah. I don't feel as though I'm going to die from it, because I feel as though these mushrooms, which I continue to use responsibly, are are doing something to stave it off. I don't think there's been enough research with the anti-inflammatory markers. But again, this is why I'm kind of coming full circle back to Oregon, using natural medicine, you know, and then proving it out with data, right? I think I'll be sitting here with a very large data set that we can all leverage, the whole industry can leverage, because there seems to be this kind of pull between synthetic and full spectrum medicine that we really want to prove out. The goal is to take pharmacogenetics of the mushroom, as you know, different genetics do different things, and pair that with the individual. So finding a genetic that works really well for concussion, which we think we have one.
Wow.
And then, you know, doing addiction, doing anxiety, depression, PTSD for vets with the setback with MDMA. I think these statewide programs are going to benefit a lot of people.
A lot of people, and it's happening already. You know, Oregon is before we went live, Daniel is now hosting, just to be clear, retreat experiences in Oregon with psilocybin. You're looking to do research as part of that. They're particularly focused on concussions, and he has a waiting list of, how long is your waiting list at this point?
So it's around just upwards of like 3,500 people.
Yeah, which is insane.
And a lot of them, 90% of that is concussion.
Right.
We're opening our first facility. I have been partnering with different retreat centers. But we're opening our first facility in Oregon on the 11th. So right now, just, you know, you've done a ton of amazing work with facilitators and trainings, and we are, you know, pairing facilitators now with that wait list. And what happened in Oregon, maybe we just touch on that, is Measure 109. It created a regulated framework where you have a licensed service center. As Paul always talks about, the environment for which you do these medicines in is very, very important. Then you have licensed manufacturers who grow the mushroom to a specific specification. You have testing facilities that test the mushroom, so you know how much psilocybin or psilocin, which is the pro drug, is in this medicine, so you know how to kind of dose it. And then you have licensed facilitators, and that created a regulated framework for people to come and heal, which is with natural medicine, which is phenomenal. Like, it gives me goosebumps to be able to do this. Yeah. Legally. And we can do this in Colorado now as well. And I imagine you'll have plans to expand into Colorado. Massachusetts is voting on this. Let's get back to the NHL PA. And the NFL, I would imagine, has a similar dialogue going on, if for no other reason than because Aaron Rodgers has been talking about ayahuasca the last couple of years, and he's one of the most prominent quarterbacks, you know, to ever live. So what would be your hope, you know, if you are successful in which I imagine you will be, in carrying out this research, and the numbers are incredible, and you're doing this legally in Oregon and Colorado with psilocybin, what would be the win for you when you go to the NHLPA? Is it that they would put finances to support more psychedelic research? Is it that they would make an announcement that they believe psychedelics have potential to treat CTE or concussion-based symptoms? What do you think is sort of the next win when it comes to getting professional sporting organizations behind these incredible treatments? Yeah, I think it would be to stop pairing guys with alcohol, right? And these brands after their career. And
wait, can you talk more about that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, people love to booze in hockey, right? And you know, Canada, Labatt's, Molson, whiskeys, we tend to grab icons of the game and then pair it with alcohol brands.
Okay.
So one thing that the NHLPA did do, along with the NHLAA, they created a research program to research CBD, which is a patented neuroprotectant and is patented by the U.S. government. That was great, and that was a huge step. And that's a Schedule I substance that's associated with cannabis, even though it's approved FDA-wise for Epidiolex for childhood seizures, still a Schedule I substance. So my goal is to just show them the research, show them how far we've come, show them that there's over 188 now clinical trials using psilocybin, the breakthrough therapy designations, and then get their medical professionals and their doctors to look at the double-blind placebo studies that have been done, and then to do an observational study with me in Oregon right now, right? That is not far-fetched at all. Or I can just continue to do I'm not going to hold my breath, right? Because again, it goes back to the liability. But one thing that I do want to do is take these individuals, take these men who are suffering underground, they're getting fed to me, track them, and then I'll show up with some type of observational study when there's 20 or 30 of them, and I'll show them the data. And then if they say no, well, then I'll publicly say that they said no, and I'll just continue on with my journey, right? Like continue on helping people, and just the only way that I know how to get them to listen is a little bit of public pressure, you know? So if we can do that in somewhat of a positive manner, then maybe one day they'll say yes, right? But that will I'm a little jaded because the doctors that run the NHLPA will have to really stick their neck out, right? And say, I believe in this. They'll have to look at the research. Have you seen the NIH systematic review for traumatic brain injury?
No.
I'll send it to you after this. It's it's amazing.
Okay.
They did this, and there's serious doctors that put their name behind that, and they said that it can work for sure. And we've seen it work. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, the NIH did a full systematic review. Partner with me, if you're listening, partner with me in Oregon right now. It's a very regulated framework, and go look at the research, and let's do an observational study together.
Well, and this is somewhat, I mentioned the research study in Ibogaine for TBI. This is somewhat how it happened, that Martin Polanco, who is a really well-respected and well-known doctor, a good friend of mine, he's worked with Navy SEALs for a long time. He's also now working with, I think, ex-professional athletes as well, and he'll do it legally in Mexico. And he got sort of Stanford behind it to interpret the data and support it, and then published through Stanford. It's made a lot of these rounds about how Ibogaine can be supportive of TBI. So I think the potential is there. And what I wanted, and they have this group, and I want to interview Nolan for the podcast. I think we will at some point, but they've specifically combined Ibogaine with magnesium because it helps to mitigate the potential of cardiac arrest.
Okay.
And it's under the lens of a nonprofit that Sergey Brin has invested in.
Okay.
And so they're now bringing this through, I think, clinical trials to sort of show how Ibogaine might be supportive of TBI, specifically for veterans, I think more so than ex-athletes. But I see a similar model with what you're doing in that, doing this observational study, getting, great protocols put into place. And that's basically where I want to go next in this conversation is, let's say I'm someone who has had 2 or 3 or 4 concussions. I have symptoms that are related to these concussions, which are quite nasty. I, hear about Daniel Carcillo's retreat in Oregon, and somehow I skip the wait list because who knows, a miracle happens, and I'm like ready to go. What is the protocol that you're putting these people through? How is it that you're bringing them into the space? Is it a 3-day experience, a 5-day experience? Is it 1 experience, 2, 3 experiences? How are you testing data before and after? Give us a little bit of sense of the structure of that experience for someone who's coming to do this work.
Sure. Yeah. So right now there's a group experience, there's a one-on-one individual experience, and then there's a 3-day retreat experience. First thing that happens is we intake you. All right. We get to know who you are. There's an OHA approved set of questions that we have to, and this well, go through. If there's certain histories of mental health indications, then some people will get disqualified. The other thing that can disqualify you are just high amounts of certain medications that may blunt the effect. You don't want somebody to pay money for a specific experience and not have that experience. So we prepare people. We have usually 2 to 3 hours of introductory calls with the OHA approved facilitator. You pick your date once you are approved, and then you come on and come into either a group experience with community, which is something that we highly recommend, People seem to do a lot better in group.
Interesting.
Yeah, especially with something as nascent as telling somebody, hey, you're going to have to give up and surrender control, right? For just a little while. And you're going to have to become curious about whatever comes up. These are things and concepts that I don't think a lot of people, especially if they're suffering, really meet in a doctor's office. And so you choose your date. You choose whether you want to come on the retreat where accommodations, transportation, food, housing is all taken care of, or you choose to come in the group one-on-one experience where we have partners, solid hotels, places to eat, itineraries set for you, etc. We ask that people take blood panels, and then we use a back-end EMR system that is HIPAA compliant, so you can know that all of your information is protected. And if you're presenting with, say, concussion, then we will ask you to fill out a survey that is associated with that, as well as you've probably heard the mystical experience and some other things that we want to track, and a well-being questionnaire, and then you come in and you have your experience. Once you have that experience, then you will have group and or one-on-one integration coaching, which is like one of the last things that, for whatever reason, and maybe you can point me in the direction of really good people, doesn't seem to be like very widely spread.
Integration coaching.
Yeah, of like, at least within the OHA, right? Because we're asking these facilitators to do so much. And once they have that experience, and then we want these facilitators to then go into prepping and allowing for other people to come in. I really want to find solid integration communities or coaching so that I can set people up. We'll actually deny people if I know that I can't support somebody in a journey afterwards, or they don't have a therapist at home or some type of life coach, we won't serve them, and we'll ask them to get that in place. And the coaching is really important. The experience is important. It's a catalyst to improve your life. Right. Then you come back here and you come back into your body, and life happens. And so that's really where you need the grit, the determination, and the support to integrate the lessons that you see or learn in these ceremonies, to not drink the Coca-Cola and to drink the green juice. Brought to
you by Squeeze.
to work out, to exercise, to mind the way that you're putting your emotions to different thoughts. You're not going to be able to stop these thoughts, but it's your responsibility for how you interact with them. So just creating that community and really helping somebody with a life plan after having such an impactful experience. Then we really just monitor people. I diligently, for 2 years, I was an extreme case. So, but I did a 5-gram ceremony every 3 months for the first 2 years.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And then I started, I do.
Was that in a group or by yourself?
It was, I don't recommend this. But the first.
Don't do what I did.
Yeah, no, definitely don't do what I did. I've also been through 15 years of talk therapy. So and I'm a very self-actualizing person.
Yeah, I mean, you're an NHL Stanley Cup champion.
So,
for God's sake.
Maybe people, I'm not saying that everybody can't handle it, but I'm kind of a little bit of a sicko where I like exploring my own mind alone. Right. I love my alone time.
Right.
But I'm now down to, one, because I just really, 1 or 2, because I also like to really delve into how we got here and what am I doing and where am I going after this. So I do recommend that people, do it with support, but I would say 90% of my journeys were 5 grams solo, eyes open. It was only,
music? Did you have music?
Music. Yeah. Okay. I actually had, I had, it was the exact same YouTube journey on loop with waterfalls, and I had visuals, 432 hertz. And it was just amazing. I'm also a creature of habit, as you can see. But one thing that I partook in on this last ceremony was in Oregon, above ground. We filmed it with Jordan Chronic. I did an HBO Brian Gumbel Real Sports special with him. 5 grams, eye shades. I kind of felt like a little bit of a hypocrite because all the clinical studies have eye shades, and I never did it with eye shades. And wow, like same medicine, different individual, different reasons for doing it. Still, I mean, I have very specific, I do it to continue to increase my awareness and my presence with my kids and in my life, and to for brain health.
Right.
Those pretty much those 2 things. And what an internal journey that is. Like, just blew me away at how different it is with eye shades on, and I can see how much better it is when you have a specific thought, and then it's like a slideshow of your life. It was amazing. So yeah. And then what I tell people is like, it's so different, right? Try it a bunch of different ways, but like for sure, preparation, proper setting, responsible to make sure you have a friend or some type of professional that can help you understand. And then, yeah, don't do it alone. Do you need somebody there so that you can fully surrender to the experience, you know? So
yeah, in the sense of, so we have a practitioner training program, which you've mentioned, and we do a retreat in Costa Rica as part of it, and we have a ceremony or 2. And typically the teaching that I'll provide as part of that ceremony for people who are in the group, and you know, it's anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 up to 5 grams of dried golden teachers.
Okay.
So like a solid
Mild,
amount,
yeah.
but we're not doing like 8 to 10 grams. And a lot of the teaching in that and being in ceremonies, I tell them experiment with like eyes closed and eyes open, or sitting up versus laying down, because a lot of the clinical research is eye mask on, playlist on, laying down, very much a surrendering pose. Whereas, you know, I've done a little bit of work with ayahuasca, and if you go work with the Shipibo, specifically the Shipibo, but also other Western practitioners with ayahuasca, they'll tell you sit up for the journey, because this is not just about taking a psychedelic and seeing what happens. It's also about the attentiveness and the energy that you bring to the journey, so you feel like there's an energy that you're circulating and moving with and working with. And I think sometimes that nuance can be lost, partly because, as we both know, working with psychedelics can be so overwhelming for the nervous system that for those who are quite new to it, they need to lay down and just kind of learn to breathe through some of this discomfort. But the more we work with this, the more skill we develop in awareness and presence and capacity to hold the energy and maybe sit up with it with our eyes closed or our eyes open. Because I found at times like the fully eyes closed can be overly intense.
Yeah.
Right. And so sometimes like the key is just open your eyes, right? If it's getting to be too much, and that can also help some of these waves to pass if you're, you know, on 5, 6, 7 grams of mushrooms.
Breath work is really important.
And learning how to regulate breath, I think, is the number one skill when working with psychedelics.
Yeah, it's the paramount thing that I forgot to mention. Like we send people a 14-day diet and a 14-day breath work. So nobody comes in on 7 days. You know, everybody has 2 weeks to prepare, which usually after 2 hours of calls, you don't want to belabor why they're coming. People are usually at the end of their rope, right? So they know exactly why they're there, and they're beaten down by the system that they've just been through. And I will say, like, there's very strong ways or views of how to do things. I don't think I've ever heard of anybody talking about different indications and then applying the different traumas with the different medicines. Like, and I am a mushroom guy. I've done ayahuasca, I've done the DMT. The ayahuasca was amazing. It showed me, you know, where we go when we die, and I've had a lot of death and birth. But I'm a mushroom guy. And
you're a fun guy, right?
Yeah. With that,
it's a bad joke.
Yeah.
Jokes for the day.
But with that, I say, like, you know, concussion survivors aren't coming and presenting themselves to us with complex PTSD, right? That's why, like, when I mentioned the way that I did things, my one thing was I know this is helping my brain by the research that I've read, And so I can take it with my eyes open and be okay alone. That being said, like, would I ever recommend my way of doing things to a non-concussion survivor? No, because you need somebody there to process serious trauma. Right. So, I just want to make sure I say that. And because we have to be more attentive with somebody that's coming to us, a veteran, for example, in organizations that I work with, like No Fallen Heroes, or if it's Jesse Gould of Heroic Hearts Project, there's a lot more preparation and attention that should be taken. So from indication to indication, it's different, even with the same medicine.
So you earlier in our interview, you mentioned the fMRI scans from Robin Carr Harris, how you saw those. Those were highly influential in terms of how you thought about brain health, and broadly, those brain scans, I think, may be the most influential graphic for the psychedelic renaissance.
It's the Beckley, the SciTech one that I rip it off all the time, but I tagged them. It's them. Yeah.
It shows placebo, and there's like some connections, but not much connection going on. And then it shows psilocybin, and it's like there are all of these connections going on in the brain. And you had mentioned that as you were doing psilocybin yourself in 2019, you took it, you had a washout period, you did it after about another 3 months, and then you were microdosing. And I think you mentioned you did brain scans as part of that?
Yes. I did brain scans prior and then 6 months. So it was after 2 high doses, the washout period of 3 weeks, and then religiously 5 days on, 2 days off. The washout just because it would kick in the psychedelic experience if I did it anywhere within that 3 week period. And I didn't, as you know, just wanted it to be subperceptual, and I just figured nothing gets fixed in 5 hours in the brain, right? So like this perpetual introduction of not only psilocybin, but things like lion's mane that increased BDNF. Those things I knew just with my research, I just needed to support myself with.
So the question I have is like, why not? So you're doing this observational research, or you want to do this observational research in Oregon. Brain scans, I think, and I could be wrong in this, I think are becoming more accessible. And because of how influential that initial, graphic was from Robin Carr Harris, I can only imagine if, 30 ex-NHL players take psilocybin and you show it before and after, how impactful it is through fMRI, it would be a graphic that really has a massive impact. Do you have any sense of why more organizations, or why you yourself, you mentioned blood panels and some of these other potentially psychological measures, but why not also focus and do brain scans as part of showing these changes?
Okay, so...
And I'm sure there's a good reason but
there is, because I don't really care what the medical system thinks of me. Right? So like, there's a very fine line between the way that I operate now. I don't want to get caught up in a situation where I think I need to prove to the medical system that this is working. We know that it's working. I think that if I go down this road of fMRI, it's cumbersome. There's a lot of time, and like I'll have to do it with academia. Then I'll have to get into this conversation with them about data sharing agreements, and they want to own the IP, similar to what happened with the Stanford, and then they want to create a drug development company out of it. I'm not interested. I've gone down that road. I'm not interested in that. What I can see happening is like I do QEEG or something like that. But I guess people find you, right?
For sure. Somehow.
People find me, right? Like, because I think they need to be found.
Right.
I just don't see any inherent value in trying to play that whole medical game again with natural psychedelics, because the reality is you cannot get a full spectrum mushroom approved through the FDA, and you never will be able to.
Right.
And I know that it kind of works in concert, right? Like we use these studies to open up more states. What I want to do is kind of get enough data, do an observational study, and then an independent IRB, which doesn't cost a lot of money, and then use that. So there have been 5,500 people that have gone through Oregon. No data. Imagine,
no data?
No data. Imagine if one of these centers, collected data, even in 100 people, and then Massachusetts, would it be a foregone conclusion, or would we be able to open that state immediately?
Right.
Florida, I want to work on next. So I'm collecting data in a manner that these medical professionals will listen, right? Do the observational and independent IRB, and then have a medical professional present it. I don't necessarily need to be partnered with that system in order to kind of achieve that, right? So I don't know. It's a very fine dance, and I think it's another conversation for another time of just how corrupt the whole system is, right? And I just don't want to
For sure.
Yeah. And I also want to be very careful. I just think that I've got a very specific kind of viewpoint, and then also knowledge with just working with the FDA. And and then, ultimately, who knows? The public doesn't know what an fMRI is.
Right.
They don't care.
Right.
All the public knows is they want to see Paul. Paul looks happy and healthy. Paul knows I've seen a shift in you and just following you, the way that you communicate language and you're triggering people. Something happened to you. I think if you do it long enough, whoever needs to hear the message is going to hear it.
Right.
And that's it.
And there's this sort of mycelial network metaphor at play that even if the NHLPA and the NFLPA, they take a decade to get behind it, we all know that there are more and more ex-professional athletes who are finding out about this because...
And they'd almost rather be underground.
Exactly. But because they know it works, right?
Yeah.
It's working. It's effective. And that is why I think psychedelics have taken off in the last 10 years, because all of the solutions that, whether it's SSRIs or other psychiatric medications or... CTE is even a somewhat recent conversation in professional sports, unfortunately. And so I think having the opportunity to weave in psychedelics and present that, and just being mindful of this mycelial network at play, that those who need to find out about it will find out about it. And eventually it's nice. We've seen the energy that can happen when certain mainstream institutions get behind it.
I would love to track tau proteins in the brain.
Okay.
As a blood marker. But that's a spinal tap, right? So it's like this kind of fine dance between, what you want to track, what people know, and then tracking that, showing that it's getting better. And my singular focus is just, if people see my thing on Instagram, I want to be able to put it into lay terms so that they understand that they can get better, right? I want people to see me running 4 miles a day. I want people to see me with my kids, interacting, doing the Halloween thing. And then I want to build Oregon and then track data and then move into Colorado. All of that, that's enough for Daniel. I don't have, too much more energy after that
To give, right? Yeah. Especially with how many kids you have? 2?
4.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah. So 4 kids. It's a full-time job in itself.
It's amazing.
Right?
No doubt. Yeah.
Well, and what I was going to sort of build off of is my senses, just like, so we're at this Eudaimonia Summit. Function Health is a main sponsor of it. They're making blood testing and blood panels much easier. So I even went in earlier this week in San Diego, got blood panels done.
Nice.
It's on an app. I can see 100+ different blood panels. I know my APOB is high now. My LDL cholesterol is high. I think it's genetic, but I'm, learning more and more about myself. My senses in the next 3 to 5 years, the capacity to do brain scans will become just as accessible as blood work is. And there's a particular individual, Brian Johnson, who has invented something called the Kernel, which is a headset that can be worn.
Is that what, so that's what, who's working with that? There's a company that's
Cybin,
yes,
was sort of in combination with them. I don't know how mainstream that is, but I sense the technology will come on board more and more, where in the next decade, it's going to be less cumbersome, less expensive, much more, there's going to be just much less friction to be able to gather individual data points, because I think we would both agree that the future is N=1 personalized medicine. And that more and more, even as you talked about these different genetic strains for different types of people, that is the ultimate goal, is to find the sort of perfect marriage between a particular psychedelic and a particular intention or indication that someone may be working through.
Absolutely. And dosage. But so in Oregon, unfortunately, it became prohibitive to track this sort of thing, right? You can't have a float tank. You can't, what I think the ultimate goal and what you'll see in Colorado is a wellness studio, a wellness place. I've been, tracking 2 guys from the retreat using NAD, which seems to extend the life of how these mushrooms make you feel. There's an FDA-approved cap that somebody can wear after an experience and before to measure how fast you're cognitively processing, how fast your brain is firing.
Is this like cognitive velocity?
Yeah. So
okay. Huberman talked about this. It's the first time I learned that phrase yesterday. It's a good phrase.
That's a good phrase.
Velocity. Is that
but like these sorts of things, right? If you want to, I'm interested in, if we want to prove that this can be used for athletic performance or human performance or peak performance and what's happening with attention or processing, which is really important for athletes who are in the moment or even top level executives, et cetera, then you can bring in a test like that, right? So I'm more interested in those kind of things because that's possible, as opposed to putting, 200, and I've looked at this, a $280,000 fMRI in Colorado. It's just really loud. Have you ever been in one?
No.
Try getting a concussion and then going on an fMRI because they have to check for brain bleeds and lesions. It's just loud and cumbersome. But yeah, I'm all for data and testing. And I agree with you, right? That I think the future is personalized medicine. And I'm also of the belief that less is more, right? Like, so don't do too much, right? Pick 1 or 2 things, validate them. And if they're working for you, like my dad always said, like, don't fix anything that's not broken.
Right. Right. Okay. Final question before we wrap up. Let's say you are successful in the next decade at accomplishing what it is that you want to accomplish. This is sort of blue sky thinking, your vision, your dream. How does the world change as a result of how you're choosing to show up with focusing on concussions and TBIs with psilocybin? What change do you most want to see in the world around you?
So when I am successful, I will be operating probably 10 to 15 of these centers, collecting data in an effort to help the industry guard against when Compass does get approval with a synthetic to treat a specific indication and they had to spend $300 million and they start to come after some of these statewide programs. I want to sit there with data to guard people and our regulated frameworks. I also want to use that data to open up more indications and just continue to, have this medicine use me and hopefully continue to be as happy and healthy as I am right now and meet people that can help this mission and get to the next level. But really it's simple, it's start with 1, crawl before you can walk, refine your narrative. And then it's not just concussion. I think that you can have different centers in different parts of the United States focusing, for example, like Oregon, we are going to focus a lot on addiction because California is right there, BC is right above us. So I think there can be an intersection between detox and addiction and intensive inpatient, outpatient. So everything mushrooms, man. And hopefully we use that data to open up more states, and we'll be sitting here in 10 years. It takes 2 years to 3 to open up each one of these states. There's 25 or so of them with some sort of regulation and framework. And then maybe descheduling, or rescheduling more so with specific language. And then, it becomes like ketamine, just a little bit easier. I don't think it'll never not be scheduled, but, hopefully working towards those things.
Beautiful. Well, Daniel, thank you for your courage and bravery, for bringing the sort of mindset of a champion to psychedelic research and psilocybin for concussions in particular. I think, the research and the work and the support that you're providing through Oregon is cutting edge, and it's going to help, and has already helped so many people. And so as that continues to expand, I can't wait to watch and support however that may work out. And I appreciate you taking time, away from your family to join us on a Sunday and sit down for a podcast interview. It's been fun.
Oh, good. Yeah, I got to check in with my boy and see how many goals he scored. I dropped him off at the hockey rink. But
good.
I do want to say, thank you for everything that you've done. I've followed you ever since I got into the industry, and like I said, I can tell you're hitting your stride. So yeah, appreciate it, man.
Thank you, Daniel. It's been an honor.
Thanks so much for watching. If you want to grow your own medicine from microdosing or high dose experiences, check out our Mushroom Grow Kit. It's the simplest way to get a reliable source of high quality mushrooms, and it includes detailed videos walking you through the entire process. No guessing, just clear instructions for best results. Check out the link in the description below.